I walked into the kitchen, holding the will in my hands, and felt the world tilt beneath me. My parents, my own parents, had cut me out completely. After I saved the family farm with $80,000 of my own money, they gave everything to my sister. And then they said nothing. No thank you, no recognition. Just silence. Hi, I'm Ella Ray, and this is the story of how I was erased from my own family's history. The farm I saved, the sacrifices I made, none of it mattered to them. But I wasn't about to let them control my life anymore. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. The gravel crunched under the wheels of my old truck as I made my way down the familiar driveway, the sun struggling to break through the thick clouds. I hadn't been home in months. Life had gotten too busy, too complicated. But there was something about the pull of this place that always seemed to bring me back, no matter how hard I tried to escape. The Ray farm in Kansas, my family's legacy, or at least it used to feel that way. The scent of hay and freshly turned earth still clung to the air, mixed with the unmistakable smell of something more, something colder. The silence. I parked by the barn, my boots sinking into the soft, cool earth as I stepped out of the truck. The trees surrounding the property were in full fall color, crimson and gold, a sign that another season had passed without much change. But I knew better. Change had already come, and I hadn't seen it coming. As I approached the porch, I felt it. The weight of memories, the pull of the past. It wasn't just the house that felt different. It was everything. The place I once called home now felt like a hollow shell. As I reached the door, I paused, my hand hovering over the old brass knob, hesitating for just a second. Then I pushed the door open. "Afternoon, Odie," my mom's voice called from the kitchen, though she didn't look up. She still called me that, even though I hadn't been Odie since high school. The nickname felt like a lifetime ago. "Hey, Mom," I replied, slipping off my jacket and draping it over the back of a chair. I glanced around the room, my eyes settling on the dusty shelves, the half-empty coffee mug on the counter, the scattered papers. Nothing felt like it used to. My mother's glasses sat low on her nose as she shuffled through a pile of papers on the table, her fingers moving absent-mindedly from one document to the next. There was something about the way she avoided eye contact that unsettled me. She didn't even seem surprised to see me. "Can you help sort these out?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Your dad's been meaning to file our taxes, but you know how he gets." I nodded, sitting down across from her and picking up the first stack of papers. Utility bills, bank statements, nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual paperwork. But as I sifted through the documents, something caught my eye. A thick, manila envelope labeled in neat handwriting, "Estate Transfer." I paused, my fingers stilling on the paper as a sense of unease crept over me. I looked up at my mom, her back still turned to me, busy with whatever she was doing. "What's this?" I asked, holding the envelope up. She glanced up briefly, then quickly averted her gaze. "Probably something from the lawyer. Just sort it." But the words on that envelope weren't just from a lawyer. They were from my family. I opened it slowly, pulling out the contents. A will. I hadn't expected much. Maybe a list of names, maybe a split of assets. But instead, the words on the page hit me like a punch to the gut. All assets, including property, financial accounts, and belongings, are to be transferred to Sophie Ray upon the death of both parents. I blinked, rereading the words. I checked the date. 6 months ago. No mention of my name. Not even a fallback clause. Nothing. It felt like the room was spinning. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking as I folded the will in half and placed it flat on the table. "What is this?" She looked up at me, her face draining of color. The realization hit her too. Her voice trembled as she tried to brush it off. "Oh, that. You found that, huh?" She pulled her glasses off and set them down on the table, avoiding my eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. How long has this been here? She swallowed, shifting in her seat, her hands trembling as she folded and unfolded the napkin in her lap. You don't need it, Odie. You don't need the land or the house. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. What do you mean I don't need it? My voice was flat now, almost mechanical. I saved this farm, Mom. I saved it with my own money, $60,000, don't you remember? My father sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. We didn't mean for it to be a surprise, he said, but his voice was distant, disconnected. He wasn't looking at me anymore. It was as if he couldn't even face me. I folded the will back into its envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the weight of everything I had done for this family. Thanks for showing me where I stand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I didn't slam the door behind me, I didn't look back, I just left. The truck started on the first try, the engine rumbling in the silence of the evening. As I pulled away from the farm, I felt something break inside of me, but I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't look back. I couldn't. And then my phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I hadn't deleted their numbers yet, but I didn't want to hear anything more from them. Not yet. I just kept driving. The fading sun casting long shadows across the empty road ahead of me. Mom, why is my name not here? What is this? The morning light streamed weakly through the curtains as I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at the familiar scene that had once been my comfort. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread wafted through the air, mingling with the scent of something that felt off. The kitchen, where I had spent countless mornings with my family, now felt cold. The walls, the counters, even the old worn-out chairs, they were all the same, but everything else had changed. I could still remember the sound of the coffee pot brewing, the clink of silverware against plates as my mom and dad would sit across from me, discussing the day ahead, planning the farm's future. But that future, as I had known it, seemed to be slipping away. In its place, there was this silence, a silence that had lingered between us, especially between me and my mother. I took a deep breath before walking further into the room. My eyes landed on her instantly. Debbie, my mother, sitting at the table, her hands folded neatly on the newspaper in front of her, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't even look up as I stepped closer. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened. I could still feel the sting of the will in my hand, the words that had carved out my place in the family, leaving me nowhere. Mom, I started, my voice steady but carrying the weight of everything I had been holding back. Why did you do it? Why am I cut out of the will? She didn't immediately answer, her eyes glued to the crossword puzzle in front of her. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before she exhaled slowly, still not meeting my gaze. I don't know what you want me to say, Ella, she said quietly, her voice lacking the warmth it once held. It's just what we decided. Decided? I repeated, my voice rising. How could you decide to just erase me like this, after everything I've done for this place, for this family? She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if she were carrying the weight of something heavier than any of us had realized. Ella, you've always been so strong. You've always taken care of things. We didn't think you needed it. I felt my heart tighten at her words. I don't need it? I asked, incredulous. You're saying that after I saved the farm from foreclosure, after I wired you $60,000 to keep this place afloat, how is that not needing anything? I could feel my frustration bubbling up, but I was trying to hold it together, trying to understand. But the words were getting harder to hold back. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the newspaper and set it aside. Finally, she looked at me, but her eyes were empty, distant. It wasn't about you, Ella. It was about Sophie. She was struggling. You know how she is, always struggling, always needing something. I felt the room grow colder. So you just decided that I didn't need anything? That I was fine? And Sophie gets everything? All the assets, all the money, all the support? Her eyes softened with something that almost resembled pity, but it only made everything worse. She needed it more, Ella. We just wanted to make sure she'd be all right. I stood there staring at my mother, trying to process the words she had just spoken. Sophie, my younger sister, the one who had always been the golden child, the one who never had to work hard, who never had to sacrifice, the one who had been given everything, including the farm, while I had been left out in the cold. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "What about everything I've done for this place? For you? For Dad?" My mother didn't answer. Her face tightened, and for a moment I thought she might say something, anything that would explain why she had treated me this way, but she remained silent, her hands folded in her lap. My fingers clenched around the envelope, the edges of the paper digging into my palm. My mom's face softened as she spoke, but it wasn't the comfort I was hoping for. It was the soft voice she used when she didn't want to confront something. "Sophie, she's always struggled. You know that. Her online stuff doesn't pay steady. We just wanted to make sure she'd be secure." I didn't know what to say. It was like I was hearing the words from a stranger, not my own mother. How could she say that to me, knowing everything I had sacrificed? "And what am I?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. Some kind of emotional support mule with a checkbook? Before she could respond, I heard the door creak open behind me. My father walked in, his muddy boots leaving a trail of dirt on the floor as he stepped into the kitchen. He froze when he saw the will. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice rough from a long day's work. Mom quickly explained, but the words were muffled in my ears as I stared at the paper in front of me, still trying to process what I was reading. "You don't need it," my mom repeated. "You always were the strong one, Odie. You don't need anything from us." I felt the room closing in on me. The weight of her words sank in like a stone in my chest. "Strength as a punishment," I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to them. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You used my strength to justify cutting me out." The words felt cold as they left my mouth, but they were true. I looked over at my father, hoping for some sign of support, some recognition of everything I had done for this family, but he was just sitting there, silent as usual. His hands were clasped in front of him, his eyes fixed on the table, unwilling, or perhaps unable, to offer any support. I turned back to my mom, the anger rising within me. "I did everything for this farm. I worked 2 jobs to make sure we didn't lose it, and you just give it all to Sophie?" The words were coming out faster now, the hurt pouring out of me. "Sophie was always struggling, Ella," my mom repeated, her voice quieter now, as if she were justifying everything in her mind. "We just thought you didn't need it. You've always been so independent, so strong. We didn't want to burden you with more." I could feel my breath coming faster, my pulse racing. "I wasn't a burden, Mom," I said through gritted teeth. "I was your daughter. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do. But now it's like none of that matters. Like none of me matters." Debbie's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't speak. She just wiped them away with the back of her hand, as if this was something she could brush off. At that moment, Sophie walked into the kitchen, her presence like a shadow in the room. She didn't say anything as she slid into the chair beside my mother. She didn't need to. I could feel her indifference, her detachment from everything that was happening. "You always made it easy for us, Ella," my mother said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were always the strong one. You didn't need us." I felt like I had been slapped. "So that's it, huh?" I said, my voice shaking with the weight of it all. "You've decided I don't need anything, and Sophie gets everything." There was no reply, just the silence between us, the kind that had been there for too long. "You always made it easy for us, Ella. You were always the strong one." The soft hum of my refrigerator was the only sound in the small apartment, the kind of quiet that comes with being alone, but it wasn't uncomfortable. No, it was different this time. For the first time in months, I could think clearly. No more distractions. No more pretending to be okay. My little one-bedroom in Topeka felt like a refuge, a place where I could finally breathe without the weight of expectations pressing down on me. The walls were bare, except for a few family photos, ones that hadn't yet been replaced by Sophie's carefully curated life, at least not here. I still hadn't gotten around to unpacking most of my things. The space was functional, but it wasn't home. Not yet, but I was getting there. I walked to the small desk by the window and sat down, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting in my glasses. I hadn't touched it for days, the weight of everything holding me back. But now I was ready. The plan was forming. For the past week, I'd been grappling with everything I had learned. My mind kept going back to that moment in the kitchen, the look on my mother's face, the way Sophie had just sat there, indifferent. The words still echoed in my head. You were always the strong one. But the strength they saw in me wasn't something to be proud of. It had been used against me. They hadn't needed me, not really. They had just relied on me to hold things together, to be the steady one, the one who could always fix everything. But now I was done. It was time to stop asking for their permission. It was time to stop pretending I didn't care, that I wasn't furious. The truth was, I was angry, not just at them, but at myself for letting it go on for so long. They had erased me from the family, yes, but I was still here, and they would hear me. I clicked on my phone and scrolled through a list of old friends, people who had known me before I became the quiet, invisible one, before I was swallowed up by the weight of everyone else's needs. I sent a few quick messages asking if they had time to talk. There was no plan in mind at first, just a need to reach out, to remind myself that I wasn't as alone as I felt. The responses came quickly, and I could feel the warmth of human connection starting to seep back into my life. In between the texts and small catch-ups, I began to realize something. I didn't need them to acknowledge me anymore. I didn't need to beg for their approval. What I needed was my own voice back. Sitting back in my chair, I stared at the blank screen of my laptop. Then I opened a new post. I didn't overthink it. I didn't pause to wonder if it was the right time or the right words. I started typing. For the past 2 years, I've been saving my family's farm. I've spent countless sleepless nights fixing what was broken, working 2 jobs, wiring $60,000 to keep it from going under, and all without a single thank you. But now, the truth is out. I saved the farm, but I've been erased from the will. My name isn't there. Because my family doesn't need me anymore. I was always the strong one, the one who could handle everything, and now they're giving it all to someone else, someone who wasn't even here when I needed help, someone who never had to sacrifice anything. I paused, my fingers hovering above the keys. For a moment, it felt like the entire weight of the world was on my shoulders. But then I finished the post, hitting send, before I could second-guess myself. I won't stay silent anymore. This is my story. This is the truth, and I won't let them take it from me. I sat back in my chair and waited. It was too early to know what would happen, too soon to feel anything more than the rawness of putting it out there, finally saying it aloud. But then, the messages started pouring in. Comments, likes, shares, all from people I didn't know, people who had gone through the same thing, people who understood the pain of being invisible, of being used, and of being ignored by the very people who should have had your back. I felt a tremor of relief run through me as I read the first few comments. You're not alone. I've been there. Thank you for sharing your story. They came in faster than I could keep up with, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I mattered. The pain didn't go away. It didn't magically fix everything. But the support, The validation from strangers, that was something I could hold on to. That was something I could use to rebuild. I clicked through a few more posts, reading the stories of others who had faced similar betrayals, similar invisibility. Their words gave me strength. And as I scrolled, I realized that I was no longer isolated. I wasn't the only one who had been left behind. There were others who had felt the same way, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. The messages kept coming, and I kept reading. Each one felt like a piece of the puzzle coming together, each one reinforcing my decision to speak out, to reclaim my story, to reclaim my life. It wasn't just about the farm. It wasn't even just about my family. It was about me, about my right to be seen, to be heard. I closed my laptop for the night, a sense of calm settling over me. I knew I had taken the first step, and no matter what came next, I wouldn't let them erase me again. I don't need them to understand. I just need them to know the truth. The warmth of the coffee shop embraced me as soon as I walked through the door. It was the kind of place where the smell of roasted beans lingered in the air, and the clinking of cups and soft chatter of patrons felt like a comfortable background to my thoughts. I needed this space, needed the hum of life around me as I pieced together the fragments of my plan. I spotted an old friend, Leah, sitting by the window, her dark curls falling loosely around her shoulders as she flipped through a magazine. When she saw me, her face lit up with a warm smile, but it faded quickly when she saw the tension in my eyes. She waved me over, and I slid into the seat across from her, taking a deep breath as I tried to find the words. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world," Leah said, her voice gentle but concerned. "What's going on, Ella?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You have no idea." She tilted her head, waiting for me to continue. I leaned back in my chair, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. Leah had been one of the few people I could rely on back when I was in high school. She was a lot like me. Practical, grounded, but even she couldn't have known the depth of the frustration I was feeling now. The years of taking care of everything, of always being the strong one, and for what? To be left out, to be forgotten, as though I had never mattered. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, my voice tight, "but I'll start here. I've been cut out of the will." Leah blinked, surprised. "Wait, what? You? How is that possible? After everything you've done for the farm?" I nodded, clenching my fists at the table. "I saved that farm. I did everything for it. And now? They're giving everything to Sophie. It's like I never existed." She reached across the table, putting a hand on mine. "Ella, that's awful. You don't deserve that." I looked down at her hand, feeling the weight of her sympathy and a strange sense of being seen. But sympathy wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to take control. "That's why I'm here," I said, looking up at her, my voice firm. "I'm going to make sure they know the truth. I'm going to make sure the whole world knows the truth." Leah raised an eyebrow, but I could see the curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I'm going public," I said. "I'm sharing my story, everything. I'm not going to let them erase me anymore." Leah didn't hesitate. "You've got my full support, Ella. You always have. If you need help, anything, just say the word." I gave her a small smile, grateful for the unspoken bond we shared. "Thanks, Leah. But this is something I have to do on my own. I've been quiet for too long. They've taken everything from me, my time, my effort, my sacrifice, and now they're going to take my silence too." Leah nodded, her expression turning serious. "I get it. You've got to do what you feel is right." I felt the weight of my words settle into the space between us, and then, with newfound resolve, I pulled out my phone. As I opened up my social media page, my heart began to race. I had never done something like this before, putting myself out there in such a raw, vulnerable way, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't stay invisible any longer. I typed quickly, pouring out everything I had been holding in for months. The truth spilled out as I described the sacrifices I had made, the sleepless nights, the hard work, the money I had wired without a second thought, and then the betrayal, the will, the erasure of my name from the family's future. I clicked post before I could second-guess myself. For the past 2 years, I've been saving my family's farm. I've spent countless sleepless nights fixing what was broken, working 2 jobs, wiring $60,000 to keep it from going under, and all without a single thank you. But now, the truth is out. I saved the farm, but I've been erased from the will. My name isn't there, because my family doesn't need me anymore. I was always the strong one, the one who could handle everything, and now they're giving it all to someone else, someone who wasn't even here when I needed help, someone who never had to sacrifice anything. I won't stay silent anymore. This is my story. This is the truth, and I won't let them take it from me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen as my fingers tingled with adrenaline. My chest was tight with anticipation, but I felt a strange sense of relief, too. It was done. I had shared the story. Now, it was in the world's hands. At first, there was nothing, just the quiet click of the phone as I refreshed the screen. But then, the notifications started. At first, just a few comments, but they kept coming. "You're not alone. I've been there, too. Thank you for speaking out." My heart began to pound as I scrolled through the messages. Each one felt like a small victory, a validation that I wasn't the only one who had been betrayed by family, by the people who were supposed to love me the most. And then, my post gained traction. Hundreds of likes, hundreds of shares. People I didn't know, people from my hometown, from all over the country, started sharing their own stories. I wasn't the only one. I could feel the power building within me as the support flooded in. Every comment, every message, every story was like a brick being laid in the foundation of something bigger than me. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a story of resilience, of fighting back against the people who had tried to silence me. My hands were shaking as I looked at the screen. It was happening. My voice, the one they had tried so hard to suppress, was now being heard. I closed my phone and looked out the window at the city streets, feeling something I hadn't felt in so long: empowerment. They might have erased me from their lives. They might have stolen my place in the family, but they couldn't erase me from the truth. This was just the beginning. They can erase me from their lives, but they can't erase me from the truth. The drive to the farm was long, but it wasn't the miles that weighed on me. It was the idea of walking back into the house that had once been my sanctuary, the place I had worked so hard to save, only to find it now a place of cold silence. The trees outside were bare, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The familiar gravel crunch under my tires felt like a distant memory, and the smell of earth and farm animals, once comforting, now seemed foreign. As I parked in front of the house, I felt the unease in my stomach. I hadn't seen them in weeks, and the thought of facing them, of confronting the people who had chosen to erase me, was enough to make my hands shake. I wasn't sure what I hoped for from this meeting, but I knew it wasn't forgiveness. I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked toward the porch, the same porch I had spent so many hours on as a child. The old, weathered swing still hung there, creaking slightly in the wind. I remembered how my mother used to sit on it, rocking back and forth and telling me stories of when she was young, her voice soothing. I had always felt safe here. Safe, but never seen. Not really. I rang the doorbell, my finger lingering a little too long on the button. A moment later, the door opened with a slow creak. My mother stood there, her posture stiff, her face set in that same expression I had come to know so well, one of resignation, of avoidance. "Ella," she said, her voice soft but cold. "You made it." I nodded but said nothing, stepping into the house. It smelled like coffee and something burnt, the scent of a family trying to pretend everything was fine. My eyes flicked around the room, taking in the familiar objects, The old pictures on the walls, the dining table where we used to sit as a family. Now it all felt hollow. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in her hands. She didn't look up when I walked in, her silence just as loud as my mother's coldness. Will was sitting in his usual spot, staring out the window as if he could avoid the confrontation by simply not participating. I wanted to scream, to make them look at me, but I held my ground. "Sit down," my mother said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. I took a deep breath and did as she asked, keeping my distance from Sophie. Will finally spoke, his voice rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "We wanted to clear the air," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. "It's been hard for all of us." Hard? I almost laughed. Hard for them? What about me? What about the years of my life I had given to them, to this farm, to this family, and all I got in return was to be erased? "I'm listening," I said, my voice calm but with an edge I couldn't hide. "What do you want to say?" My mother shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. She was always good at that, avoiding the hard conversations, the truths that were too painful for her to face. "Ella, we know you've done a lot. We've never meant to make you feel unappreciated." I shook my head. Unappreciated? Is that what this is about? My voice was rising now, but I couldn't stop it. "You erased me from the will. You took everything I worked for, everything I sacrificed, and you gave it to Sophie. You didn't even give me a chance to explain, to say goodbye to the family I thought I was a part of." Sophie finally looked up, her face a mixture of guilt and indifference. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said, the word sharp. "Don't pretend you care. You've never had to fight for anything. You've always had everything handed to you, and now you're going to turn around and act like I'm the one in the wrong." There was a heavy silence, thick with unspoken words. Sophie's eyes darted away from mine, her hands tightening around the phone. Will's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. My mother finally exhaled, as though the weight of my words had hit her. "We did it because we thought it was what Sophie needed. She was struggling, Ella. You were always so strong. We didn't want to burden you." "Burden me?" The word stung, but I wasn't going to let them take this from me, too. "I've been your burden, haven't I?" I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "You've always used me, made me the strong one, the one who can carry everything. And now you've replaced me. I've been here my whole life, and you've never once stopped to ask how I felt." My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't look away. I wasn't going to let them have the last word. "I'm done being the silent one, done being the strong one for you. You all can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." Will stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "This isn't helping, Ella. You're only making it worse." I watched him for a moment, then shook my head. "No, Dad. It's not me who's making it worse. It's you. It's all of you." He didn't respond, only turned and walked out of the kitchen. My mother's eyes followed him, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe, or regret, but it was gone too quickly for me to be sure. Sophie remained silent, her face unreadable. But her silence wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't going to let it be enough. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a little more force than necessary. "This isn't about forgiveness," I said, my voice steady but fierce. "It's about truth. And for once, I'm not going to let it be silenced." I walked toward the door without looking back, feeling the weight of years of silence lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't waiting for them to come after me. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I had already found my voice. I had already told my truth, and that was enough. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about truth, and for once, I'm not going to let it be silenced. It felt like a lifetime ago that I first shared my story online. The initial hesitancy, the uncertainty about how the world would receive the truth. I could still remember the tightness in my chest as I hit post, unsure of the fallout. But everything had changed since that moment. I was no longer waiting in the shadows of my family's silence, hoping for their approval. I had taken control of my own narrative. Now, standing in front of a crowd of strangers, my heart was pounding, but not from fear. This time, it was different. It was anticipation and liberation. I had been invited to speak at a local conference about financial abuse within families, a topic I had become all too familiar with. My journey was now part of a greater conversation, a conversation I was no longer afraid to lead. The room was filled with people, some of them older, some younger, but all of them connected by a shared experience. Each person seemed to carry the weight of their own burdens, their own struggles. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to speak. My mind raced for a moment, but the words came as easily as breathing. "This is not just my story," I began, my voice steady but filled with the rawness I had worked so hard to contain. "This is a story shared by so many of us, those who have been silenced, ignored, or erased by the very people who were supposed to love us the most." I paused, taking in the faces in the crowd. The room was silent, hanging on every word. I spent so many years trying to make them see me, trying to make them understand that I was worthy of love, of recognition. But I've learned something in the process. I don't need their approval anymore. I have found my own voice. As I spoke, I could feel a shift in the room. It wasn't just my words reaching them. It was the understanding that we all carried this weight in different ways, but we didn't have to carry it alone anymore. "I saved my family's farm," I continued, a slight bitterness coloring my words. But the true saving came when I realized I didn't need them to validate my worth. I saved myself, and that's what I'm here to talk about. What it really means to reclaim your life, to rebuild it on your own terms. There was a gentle hum in the room, a sound of recognition. People began nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply listening intently, absorbing the truth that had been so long buried beneath layers of shame and silence. When I finished, I stood there for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for taking up space. For the first time, I felt as though I was exactly where I was meant to be. The applause started slowly and then grew louder, the sound of recognition and solidarity filling the room. The people here, the strangers, they understood me in ways my family never had. It wasn't the approval I had once sought from them, but it was something more profound. It was validation from people who knew what it was like to feel invisible, to feel rejected by those they loved. I stood there, in the spotlight, not for my family's sake, but for mine. And as the applause continued, a tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but from relief. It had been so long since I had felt seen, really seen, for who I was and what I had done. And here, in this room full of people, I finally felt it. The applause didn't stop. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. For the first time, I felt like I had a place in the world that wasn't defined by my family's expectations or their rejection. I had built this moment myself. No one else had handed it to me. This was my story, and it was finally being heard. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. There would be no going back. I had already moved forward, and the person standing in front of these people was someone who no longer needed anyone's approval but her own. I no longer needed their approval. I was enough on my own. I smiled softly to myself, stepping away from the podium. As the crowd continued to cheer, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't just the applause that mattered. It was the quiet certainty in my chest, the realization that I had finally embraced my truth. And it was enough. As Ella stood there, feeling the weight of the applause, she realized something important. She had stopped seeking her family's approval a long time ago. Her journey was no longer about fixing broken relationships or searching for validation. It was about embracing her own truth and reclaiming the power she had always had within herself. The crowd's applause wasn't just recognition for her story, but for the strength to share it and move forward. In life, we all face moments when we must let go of the expectations others place on us. It's easy to get lost in trying to please those around us. But true peace comes when we learn to value our own worth and take control of our narrative. If we can learn to forgive ourselves and embrace our strengths, we can find the freedom to live life on our own terms. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your own experiences in the comments or connect with others who may be going through similar struggles. We're all in this together.